Imagine being dead. Now, as you continue, imagine that you're sitting on the right side of God, walking on those golden houses that we've been promised. And you're just drinking milk and honey. Then suddenly you find yourself in court with a debt to KRA. That may not happen to you because you may not be on the right hand of God, but I hope you enjoyed imagining it. But for one company, that scenario played out exactly that. In Kenya, you can legally apply to have your company removed from the official company's register. The process is very straightforward. You publish a notice in the Kenya Gazette, you wait for 3 months, and if within those 3 months nobody objects, the company vanishes. You no longer have to make any returns, you no longer get any letters from KRA, and you have no tax obligation anymore. Just like that, everything disappears. On paper, it sounds like the perfect exit strategy. And what one of Nairobi's construction company directors learned from the most expensive way possible is that dissolving a company does not dissolve its debts. If you owe KRA money and you decide to strike off your company without telling KRA, the law gives the courts the power to bring back the company from the dead, and they're only bringing the company not for it to trade, but for the sole purpose of collecting what is owed. You have to give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. The company in this story owed KRA over 262 million. Not a million, not two, but 262. Now, that's enough money to build several schools, according to KRA. They could also build a hospital, or could also fund the president's special jet to go around, or build a stadium. Like those 10 stadiums that I don't know if they were ever completed. But anyway, I digress. Let's come back to the case. Now, the director struck the company off, watched it disappear, and as they did that, he had one quiet smile. The problem that he had, according to him, had just solved itself. But at KRA, somebody noticed. And what happened next should be a required reading for every company director in Kenya who thinks that a Gazette notice is a shield against KRA. Now, by the end of this video, you will know exactly why a Gazette notice is not enough to protect you from KRA. You will also understand what the law actually requires you to do before striking off a company from the register of companies. And I will also let you know what happens to directors personally, to the directors in person, when a company is restored to the register for the purposes of settling debts with KRA. Let's get into the story. Now, Cheru Construction Company was a Nairobi-based firm that had built roads, buildings all across the city. But behind this visible success, a serious problem had been building not for 1 year, but for several years. What had happened is that the tax bills had piled up. They owed income tax, they owed withholding tax, but most importantly, they didn't have the money to pay. Even the VAT that was owed to KRA, the company had no money. Now, month after month, the numbers kept climbing. I think the directors had no intention of ever paying it. So every month, the tax bill increased. And the interest and penalties that were payable on this money kept stacking up on each other, like bricks. By 2021, when COVID was still around, the total amount that was owed to KRA had grown to over 262 million. But the director, Zhang, discovered something that looks like a miracle. A miracle that even for you, with Branch and Fuliza chasing you around, you should remember. Under Kenyan law, a company can apply to be voluntarily removed from the official company's register. And to be removed from this register, the process is quite simple. One, you publish a notice in the Kenya Gazette, the one that you never read, and wait for 3 months to see if anyone will object. If no objections come during that time, the company is gone. No company, no obligations, just like magic, the company disappears into the void. Now, Zhang, upon realizing this, Zhang gathered his fellow directors. They all came, sat in the boardroom, or I think they sat in the boardroom or something like a boardroom, They ordered tea, they ordered mandazi, they ordered samosas. And then they took the rules, they took the guidance, and they read the rules carefully. The law required the government to publish a notice in the Gazette inviting anyone in the country with an objection to come forward within 3 months before a company is struck off. Now, one of the directors apparently, and he said this with like the confidence that tends to age badly, that KRA is it's giant. There is a lot of bureaucracy. And correctly, with thousands of companies to track, no one would be reading the Kenya Gazette. You also don't read it, Sindio. But wait till someone who sold land to you reports the title stolen and reports that title that you hold, he reports it as lost in the Kenya Gazette. They will be getting a new title. Anyway, back to our story. Our guys are there taking tea, taking mandazi. And that's the point of this story. On July 23, 2021, a Gazette notice number 7484 was published. And this notice announced that Chelu Construction wanted to be struck off the register. 3 months passed. July, August, September. 3 months passed. And no objection came from KRA for the company not to be struck off. And just like that, Chelu Construction Company Limited disappeared from the register. Now, it's like getting a death certificate while you are sitting on the beach. Like the way I hear a former governor of a certain county went to prison, death certificate was issued, but he's still alive. Story for another day. Zhang allowed himself a quiet smile because in his eyes, the problem had solved itself. Or so he thought. But at KRA, a certain officer was just running some routine checks on companies that had outstanding debt liabilities because this company had quite a debt. That someone must have been an accountant, like, what are you doing down there? Because accountants have apparently no life. But let's go back to the accountant. He noticed something that happened that was very strange. He noticed that Chelu Construction Company had tax assessment that were going back several years behind. Now, the digital records showed a liability of like 262 million. But when he searched for the company in the official register, the company didn't exist. It was gone. Someone had struck the company off the official register of companies. Now, as the good accountant that he is, he pulled several Gazette notices, read them carefully, and then asked the question that changed everything. And that question is, had Chelu Construction notified KRA directly before filing the application to be struck off the register? The answer was a simple no. Second question, had they served KRA with a copy of the application as the law required? The answer was no. Another question, had they applied first to cancel their tax registration? Because remember, these guys owed tax already. But absolutely no. They never applied to cancel their tax obligation. And by failing to cancel their tax registration, the company had automatically triggered an additional penalty of 1 million shillings. In November 2023, KRA filed an application before the High Court seeking to have Chelu Construction Company restored to the register of companies. But Zhang came back from the beach and, as a good person would do, he did his best to fight back. He argued that, one, a Gazette notice had been published as required by law, and in 3 months, no one came with an objection for the company not to be dissolved. In those 3 months, KRA did nothing. And according to the director, the silence from KRA was the agreement that the company could be struck off the register. If KRA had in any way wanted to collect the taxes that they are now claiming, they should have sent a formal demand before the company was dissolved. And according to the director, the company owed nothing because nothing had been formally been demanded before they were stricken off the register of companies. And besides, KRA was not really a creditor because no enforcement action had ever been taken against the company before it was dissolved. Because you should be informing all your creditors before you dissolve a company. On April 25, 2025, Pope Francis lay at St. Petersburg Basilica with his casket sealed ahead of his public funeral. And around the same time, Lady Justice Rhoda Ruto delivered her ruling. It's a Ruto with a double T. She examined the tax records and, after examining all those tax records, confirmed that the assessment had been made before the company was taken off the register of companies. The company had also been filing tax returns both before it was dissolved and after it had been dissolved. And because of this, the tax was clearly due and KRA was right to demand it, and KRA was clearly a creditor. Then she addressed the key question about the Gazette notice. And to Ruto, the answer was firm. Section 900, subsection 1 of the Companies Act places an obligation on the company that is applying to be stricken off the register to give a copy of the application to every single person that the company owes money to. So every creditor must be notified directly. So you don't just need to publish in the Gazette. So the publication in the Gazette is fine, but it doesn't replace the obligation to notify every single creditor. That means you cannot hide behind a newspaper advertisement to avoid notifying someone that you already know you owe money to. So the 3-month window that was in the Gazette was for unknown creditors who might not be aware that the company was being dissolved. For the creditors who are already known, and KRA was very much known creditor, given the years that the company had failed to file returns and make payments, should have been told directly. And because of this, the judge ordered Chelu Construction Company to be restored to the register of the companies. In that way, the company that had tried to vanish was alive again, and it came back with all the tax debt that it had accumulated over time. The 262 million tax back was back on the table. And not just the 262 million. There was an additional 1 million penalty for failure to cancel their tax registration. And most importantly, the directors of the companies remained personally accountable. As thousands of mourners gathered in Rome for the funeral viewing and the impending burial of Pope, Chelu Construction Company was restored to the register. And may the Pope continue resting in peace. Here's the lesson for you. 1, you cannot make a debt that you already have disappear by making a company disappear. The law remembers, and the courts can restore what you tried to erase. If you are genuinely winding down a company that, let's say, has tax obligations, there is a correct process to do this. First, you must apply to cancel, let's say, your VAT or your income tax registration with KRA before you simultaneously apply for the strike-off. Secondly, you must notify every creditor, including KRA, directly and in writing that you are applying to dissolve the company, and you must keep proof of that notification. Third, you must settle or make arrangements to settle all your tax liability before the strike-off is finalized. And you must do all this within the timelines that have been set in law, because late compliance adds penalties that are entirely avoidable. A Gazette notice, just putting it out there, is not a shield. That is just a public announcement for the benefit of creditors who may not know about your company. So they will see the notice and just get to know about it. But that does not excuse you from picking up the phone or writing a letter to the people you already owe and tell them you are seeking to dissolve the company. If currently you are a company director considering dissolving your company, or if you are just out there dealing with a company that has outstanding tax obligations with KRA and you are not sure of the correct process that you need to go through to have that company struck off the company register, reach out to us before you file anything. The cost of getting this process wrong, as Chelu discovered, is significantly higher than the cost of getting it right. In the next video, I'm going to tell you about an elderly landlord in Nairobi who found himself facing 170 million tax demand. And they were facing this not because they had hidden any income, not because he had not paid anyone, but he made payment but never asked anyone for a receipt. His story is genuinely heartbreaking, and the lesson it carries about record keeping will stay with you for the foreseeable future. Watch that video next.